I am so glad to be here. I'd like to welcome everybody to our weekly webinar. And as you know, we've been in the theme of doing, Mike Green and I, is we're taking municipal statistical areas and we're creating an archive that we can put onto our website. Free information that you can get to kind of say, so I'm sort of thinking about this. You could watch one of these episodes where we're talking about the numbers and some behind the scenes things that are going on in the area and kind of get an idea of what's happening. From that, you should then order either a best sites report, a consultation, or if you happen to know a specific place you want to go, a practice site viability report. We want to help you. And one little argument I had with another one of our good clients this week, he said, you guys are more expensive than almost all the other demographic companies, and they aren't done immediately. And I have to remind him, excuse me, if you are looking for the cheapest way to get a little bit of data, you're making a mistake in this profession, because you don't want cheap, you want good, and you want thorough. You've got a lot at risk. Demographics is a way to mitigate that risk. So I digress. Let me go ahead and tell you what we're going to talk about today. Today we are going to discuss Arizona, and very specifically the two big counties, the municipal statistical areas, Pima and Maricopa counties. And this you ought to know. Now, why? Because right now, Arizona is growing crazy fast. We've got a lot of international migration, but especially we have a lot of national migration. People are saying, I would like to go to Arizona, and we're going to talk about why and where. So,
as you're pulling, Scott, as you're pulling that up, let me help you with your transition here. For those of you that want to find that information on the website of the different geographic areas and our previous webinars, you can do it two ways. You can type in drdemographics.com/replay, or you can go to Dr. Demographics, go to the free resources tab, and click on the webinar replay option, and you will be able to find all of our previous episodes of our webinar, a webinar that we've now been doing for, how long have we been doing this webinar, Scott?
Way
2 years?
long. I don't know, a couple of years.
If it's 2, it might as well be 10, honestly. And so we've been doing many episodes. We've covered lots of great topics, and that is the cornucopia of knowledge, season specific, that you'll be able to find on our website. Scott, looks like you've got a presentation up. Why don't you take it away?
I do. Okay. Well, let's talk about Arizona. As you probably know, it's a western state, and it happens to be well positioned. Now, Arizona is hot, hot, hot. And I mean that in the fact that we've got a lot of population moving here. The job market is doing very well. And just generally, it's friggin' hot all year long. Anybody, though, who decides that they want to go golfing in the day after Christmas, this is the place to go. It was kind of like God's doorstep, like Florida West. But everybody has decided this is a place to live instead of businesses because of where it is. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this. You are looking now at a heat map of the population in Arizona. And as you will note, there's a lot of that dark green in Arizona, which means ain't nothing going on. Part of it's Indian reservation, part of it's mountains. But what you're really going to see is those places that are, red. You're going to note Tucson, but especially Greater Phoenix. And Greater Phoenix is going to include, most of Maricopa County is going to be synonymous with Greater Phoenix. Scottsdale, Mesa, Chandler, Ahwatukee. And what we're finding is a lot of people are coming here, and I'm going to have to talk to you about the good news and the bad news of why. Now, that being said, if we look at the cities that you want to take into account, people do look at the heat and they get all freaked out. Tucson's hot. So is Tempe, Glendale, Surprise, Phoenix, Scottsdale. Those are warm places. It can get up to 115 degrees during the summer. But, when it's about 80, 40 degrees during the winter, that makes things nice. I just want to point out that we have a couple of areas of promise in Arizona that I want to bring up. One is Flagstaff and the other is Prescott and its companion, Prescott Valley. They are much cooler, and I'm going to talk to you about these two places later in the report, or in our experience today, because I'm seeing these as two places that I think are really going to grow. I may be alone. I know people may say, Scott, you're out of your mind. You're alone, and don't judge me. Now, Arizona's over the year job growth is what is really important. Since 2014, jobs have been picking up crazy. The second quarter of 2019, Arizona added 76,600 jobs. Now, I know if you're in New York City, you kind of go, well, that's no big deal. Look, if you're in a Western state that has had traditionally fairly small growth and little population, that's a lot. But remember, these are not retirees who are picking up these jobs. These are people in the middle income, sometimes upper middle, lower middle, but they're doing reasonably well. And growth basically has been translated to 2.7%. It is about the same thing as the previous quarter of 2.6%. Now, the reason I bring that up, the national rate's only been 1.6%. So when you look at a growth rate that is close to 50% to or whatever percent growth, and it's being consistent, and the projections for growth are doing well, doctors, it's the place you've got to consider, and not just because of the old people. We're going to talk a little about the demographic character of the place as well. Now, the Phoenix MSA, which includes Maricopa and Pinal counties, added 66,000 jobs over the year in the second quarter. Now, people don't usually care about quarterly job growth. The reason I bring that up is, guys, that is the thing that's going to show where the future lies. If an area is growing by quarter, whenever 2 or 3 quarters come together, and one of those quarters happens to be in the fall, that's a prediction of what's going to happen in the next year. So, good risk to own land, good risk to start up a practice, good risk to purchase. And ultimately, when you're doing demographics, that's what we're really measuring, your risk. Now, Arizona was the second fastest growing state, increasing in its population by nearly 40%. In 2010 to 2015, it was the 7th fastest growing state. Now, do I care that other states are growing faster or less quick? No, I don't really care that at all. But what we're seeing is Arizona is consistently doing well. And that's the trick. Now, I'm going to get to some maps and some data, so stick with me for a minute. And I'm going to talk to you about the bad news about why Arizona is growing. And frankly, I'm not happy. For one thing, it is the rise of the West. The Western United States is growing for a couple of reasons. And one of them is there is a lot of international growth. Arizona is where the middle class of Mexico is moving. Now, I know everybody has the idea of Mexico being only poor. There are a lot of people who have money who are moving not to California as they once were, but rather to Texas, Florida, and also Arizona. They're buying homes. They're well employed. Many of them, the middle class, speak English. So these are not necessarily people who are doing stoop labor, and which has been the traditional things in Texas and in California. These are people who have professions, people who own things and businesses. Now, that's a very good thing. The birth rate in Arizona is also doing pretty darn well. And if anybody has ever hung around Mesa or Chandler, you will note there are a lot of kids and a lot of pregnant ladies. And some people go, oh, I don't care, we're not going to have it. Look, if you're in a profession, a healthcare profession, having a high birth rate is a big benefit to you. Now, I'll talk a little more about that later. But the other problem is California. Now, I'm not saying that California is in a free fall at this moment, but economists, demographers, we're all worried about it. We're worried about California falling apart. Not just Southern California, but all California. And you say, well, what's the problem? Well, for one thing, it is so exceptionally expensive to build a house in California. And there is a movement by the environmental friendly people in California that want to get rid of the single family dwelling. Now, I will be honest with you, when they've done surveys, people want to have a home. They want to have a house that they own. They would like to have a backyard. And knowing that there's kind of a desire to be outdoors, do things, having a home is important. And one of the closest places to California where it's having its biggest problems is Arizona. So because of that, people are moving across the border. It's a short U-Haul drive. And granted, it's a lot of middle class people who move. These are not the ultra big wig money people, as you've left behind in California. These are people who are primarily middle income. Now, if we were to take the United States and divide it into quintiles, into 1/5, about 20%, the second, third, and fourth quintiles, those that are in the middle, are what's moving to Arizona. Those that are at the top and those that are at the bottom, they're sticking around in California. Now, some people kind of like that. They don't want to have a lot of people who are moving into Arizona and kind of Californicating the state. I didn't make that term up, but you can buy a bumper sticker to that effect. So let's talk about where in Arizona there's a lot of the growth and where the people have moved. Number one is Phoenix. Now, Phoenix is obviously the biggest place with about 1.5 million people. And that's doing pretty well. This is a 2017 estimate. It actually exceeded the estimate. Mesa is a contiguous community that is off to the east of Greater Phoenix. And that area has not only increased in size to close to 500,000, but its income is really gone up. It was like an investment that paid off. Housing prices are pretty high. Now, next to that is Chandler, which is not as high. Scottsdale, remember, got really kicked in the guts when it came to that Great Recession during the Obama years. But it is back up to about 250,000 people as well. So when we're looking at Mesa, Chandler, and Scottsdale, there are a lot of practices that are still starting up, but really the way to go is to find a practice for purchase. There are older doctors who've retired, and yes, they're making a killing on the investment that they've had in those three cities. Now, Glendale and Gilbert are growing reasonably well. Frankly, they haven't grown quite as much, but I'm going to tell you something. As far as the quality of life, Glendale and Gilbert are doing great. Now, we'll talk about maps in just a second. And these are not the only places to look. So I want to talk about other places in Arizona to consider going. The city that is growing fastest in Arizona is Queen Creek. Again, I'll show you a map of where these things are. The amount of growth has been sort of phenomenal. The biggest problem in some of these cities has been they have the access to water. Obviously, you need water to run businesses and to take care of the population. But what we've generally found is Arizona has been clever in its aqueducts and its reservoirs, and it's hung on to its water pretty well. Now, Queen Creek's fastest growing. Next is Maricopa, which is actually a town, not just the county. Marana, San Luis, and Sahuarita have also surprised everybody. They're not as big, and they're a little more ethnic, but they have done extremely well. Now, if you then go to the western side of Maricopa County, you look at Goodyear, and Litchfield Park is in that general area. They've done very well as far as growth, but they're also hanging on to money. It is a problem that a lot of people have come into Arizona, into the greater Phoenix area, and they've dramatically increased the price of housing. Now, that is not a good thing if you happen to be a local and you kind of go, gee, I can't afford to live here. There are places on the outskirts, especially on the north and further to the east of the metropolitan area, that are places that the local people are migrating over to. But if you look at Goodyear, Surprise, which is primarily a retirement place, they've done really well. Il Mirage. Casa Grande is one of those places that I was mentioning that's on the east side of town that is showing good growth, particularly on the lower middle class and middle class populations. Lots and lots and lots of family homes. Now, one thing you got to know, and this is going to be true of Gilbert as well, the lot that they're selling is not going to be as big. People aren't having big backyards like they used to. And much of the new growth within these cities is going to show a fairly large house, about the same as they've always been, but smaller lots. People don't like working in the yard as much, which has, interestingly enough, kept the prices down in new houses. Just be aware you're not getting as much for your bang for your buck as you used to when you were a young pup. Now, let's talk about these places. Now, as you can see, Surprise, Mirage, and Goodyear are up in the Phoenix area. Now, one thing about that Surprise area, you can see the tag area easily. There's a dental school up there, medical schools and stuff like that. So it's created a little bit of an artificial competition. The poor and the indigent are being handled by the schools, but the loop that goes around Phoenix, as you can see here, is the Superstition Highway, for example, is part of that loop. These are places that a lot of people are finding that they want to go. Now, if somebody were to say to me, Scott, where should I really consider practicing? I've got to say Wintersburg, Buckeye, and Avondale, Goodyear, Litchfield Park are still doing very well. That's kind of where a lot of people from California are moving because psychologically it's not that far. Remember, Phoenix isn't that far from the border. If we look at that area between Tucson and Phoenix, you find the towns of Gilbert, Queen Creek, which I said was growing like crazy, Maricopa, and Casa Grande. I have been looking at lots of places in these areas. Now, there's a little pocket of poverty, and people go, ooh, poverty, ooh, bad. No, but just remember, people can afford to live in a place where they have that poverty. So I'm just saying it's not that bad. Now, Marana and Suarita, which is on the south side of Tucson, these are places that I think are showing pretty good housing development because they're on the outskirts of a largish town. Now, Tucson is generally older than Phoenix, more retirees, and it's not growing at as fast a rate. And some people think, well, it means I don't want to go there. No, don't think that at all. The reality is all those homes in that region are hanging on to their value much more. But it's on the outskirts of Tucson that you really are seeing potential growth. And by the way, one little thing that I don't mention too much, Cave Creek. I have a lot of confidence that Cave Creek is going to take off. Paradise Valley has already done well, and Fountain Valley. But it's that area on the extreme north of Maricopa County, I think, is looking good. And I think that if you're not looking for a very big spread, Greater Tucson, and I'm talking about Suarita and Marana, are good places to consider going. I'm sorry if I'm going so fast, but you guys, I just want to make sure that I get through all my material. Now, there is a study that was done recently that I found very amusing, and they talk about what's going to happen in the future to Arizona. And they were saying that in 2000, there were 5.1 million people here. There are projections, and these are pretty solid right now, of looking at what's going to happen when the area has 16 million people. Can the area sustain that many? And I'm going to be honest with you, yes, I think it can. Now, one reason that I think it can is because energy in Arizona is fairly, relatively inexpensive. In other words, Arizona didn't freak out about global warming because it's already hot as hell. All right, excuse me. But the point is, there are some people who are saying that the future of Arizona is pretty rosy. Part of the problem is there are not the political, it's not a problem, but there's not the political will to close off growth in Arizona that there are in other places. Just to tell you. Now, I promise to tell you a little bit about a place that I'm seeing, and this is on the north side of the Maricopa County area, and if you want to call it the I-40 corridor, you can. These are places that are not quite as hot. It's a lot more mountainous, and there's a lot of outdoor recreation, not quite the amount of golfing that you're going to find. And I-17 connects this area with Phoenix, which is to the south. My prediction is that we're going to see significant growth in new cities and new developments within the existing cities along I-40, particularly on the south side of I-40. That Sycamore Canyon wilderness area won't allow for a lot of growth, and there are restrictions environmentally. But if you look at the area of Chino Valley, Cottonwood, Cornville, Prescott Valley, Prescott, and Sedona, I think you're going to note in time, that's where the smart money is going to invest. Now, do I think it's going to happen quickly? Do I have an absolute knowledge of it? No, I'm not a realtor and I'm not investing in real estate. But I'm going to tell you as a demographer, I just see a lot of potential here. Interstate 40 is going to continue to be widened. And I believe that it's going to continue to attract people, particularly those interested in outdoor recreation. So in my humble opinion, keep your eye on this space. It's going to be a good place to go. All right, now, Mike, I just want to call you up, make sure if you have anything to add that you can do that. I'm going to say one of the things that Mike is working on a lot are marketing reports. Now, Mike, the reason the marketing report is so good isn't just to say, how do I build up the practice? If you have an existing practice, you want to get a marketing report. Am I about right there, Mike?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point because, and especially in an area like Greater Phoenix, because Phoenix has been good for a while, like you mentioned. And so because of that, it's been on people's radar for a really long time. And Phoenix isn't the only place. There are lots of other places in the country, but Phoenix is an area that you are going to need to be a marketer. There is no question about it. You are going to have savvy marketers around you that you are going to have to compete with. And it doesn't matter if you're a dentist, a veterinarian, whatever. You are going to need to be a marketer. Even if you are a specialist that doesn't do any public-facing marketing, for you to be able to get referrals, you're going to have to be a marketer. And so I would say Phoenix is one of those areas, Greater Phoenix, that a marketing report is just crucial because you are going to not only get the analysis of exactly what your neighborhood looks like, which is probably different than what it looked like 18 months ago, but you are also going to get a few specific strategic ideas of what's going to work in your area. I don't know of any other resource that is going to be as specific as a marketing report that's backed with the experience that will come from Dr. Demographics between Scott and I.
So Mike is working on these descriptions weekly of psychographics, showing, in other words, what the types of people are in an area, not just their number. So that if you move in there, you can say, this is the kind of practice that will do best here based upon the types of people and their market demands, their desires.
Yeah. And Phoenix is a great example because if you're on the southeastern side of Phoenix, it's very different than the western side of Phoenix. Yeah. It's extremely different. And so that's why that's critical information.
Just to also be a little more specific on it, I'm seeing certain parts of the country that are particularly good for cosmetic procedures. And I'm talking about cosmetic dentists, dermatologists, physical therapists, but really, and I'm going to even throw this out, veterinarians, I think in Phoenix have a huge potential if marketed correctly.
Yeah.
Because there are so many services that a veterinarian can do that are going to be remarkably important. And I think the same thing is true of optometry and ophthalmology.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at a population, not just geriatric, but that is more year round, which is what Phoenix is becoming, or this part of Arizona, I think there's good potential for significant new practice growth and existing practice development within areas that have not been capitalized upon. So I'm just going to say, you guys, I'm seeing this as a really good place to go, but you don't want to go someplace and get stuck and orphaned in an island in the middle of a community that is not growing, isn't changing, or has way too much competition.
Yeah.
That's where we can help you.
And I will just say that if you are watching this in the month of November, and some of you will be watching it after, but if you are watching this in the month of November, and if you are interested in getting a marketing report, watch your emails. I'll leave it at that.
You're not saying there might be a reason to watch their emails.
I'm just saying watch your emails, Scott. Don't read into it any further.
I know. All right. You guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll pay attention to these because we want to really help you find the perfect place to put a practice. Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate your help, and we'll talk to you all again soon.